the last Symphony X record was from 2015. That it was Ross's accident. You're now working on the next one.
What else are we gonna do?
If you ask anybody about prog metal, Symphony X always comes up. Started in 1994 by guitarist Michael Romeo, who quickly surrounded himself with extremely talented musicians, Symphony X have gone on to release 9 studio albums and perform live in front of thousands of people all around the world. But despite being widely perceived as the creative force behind Symphony X, Michael Romeo does not want to limit himself just to this trailblazing band. That is why, in 2018, he released War of the Worlds Part 1, his first solo album, and why now he's about to release War of the Worlds Part 2, which will be out on March 7th via Inside Out Music. And so, as we get ready for what I know is a great album, I am very lucky to be joined by Michael Romeo himself. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thank you, dude.
It's been a crazy couple of years, and touring musicians have been especially affected by everything that's been going on. How are you doing?
How do you think, man? I mean, it's been rough. It's been a rough time. Um, and I think the hardest thing now for me and for the band, even Symphony X for the guys, just the way this whole thing kind of went down. In 2020, beginning of 2020, I figured it's like, okay, I'm gonna finish up this part 2 of the solo material. The band had tours coming up April, I think it was. So I was like, all right, this is cool, man. I'll get back to the solo stuff. I'll finish up part 2. The band will be touring into the spring, and everything will be great. And then of course, just everything, went to hell. The solo record, everything kind of slowed down. Working with my buddy Simone in Italy, and he's locked down. He can't get to the studio, and so there was all that kind of things, all that crap that delayed everything. And then of course the band tours being canceled, and it's like, oh, that sucks, but next year will be okay. And then we get into 2021, and it's the same shit, and it's like, oh man. So luckily with the solo record, a lot of it was already done. A lot of it was ready to go. It's been done for about a year now. Just kind of sitting on it just to wait to see, and the label, when's a good time to release and all that. But now, the solo record's done, it's coming out like you said. And now, talking to the band guys, we have a tour coming up in May, and we're talking about a new record. And this is the thing, I think, the worst of it. It's like, yeah, those tours being canceled, that sucks. And financially, man, crushing for musicians, crushing. But I think it's the inspiration thing of writing and being a band and doing band things. I mean, I talked to Russ like last week. I talked to LaPon yesterday. And it's like, yeah, man, what are we going to do with this record? And, I come down here every day, and I'm trying to work out some riffs. And I think of us just not doing band stuff for 2 years, or playing on stage for 2 years. Just the silly things, being on the bus and goofing around and doing stupid shit. I mean, just all those things, that whole thing. So when you get into the studio, it's like, okay, yeah, man, here we go. So now it's like, it's kind of slow. And I think it's just because of so long not being in that environment.
You haven't been on stage at all for the last 2 years?
2019 was the last time, and that was it. Once everything shut down, I mean, that was it. Yeah. All those tours were canceled, all the European stuff, everything just went away, So that, to me, yeah, it sucks the tours were canceled, and it sucks financially you're taking that hit. But I think now it's like, okay, now it's like, oh yeah, let's, you want to be inspired, and you want to work on the new record, or be creative. And it's like, man, it's, I mean, for me anyway, it just feels a little slower than normal to kind of get that fire, because it's like, there's just so much crap going on. And a lot of musician friends, a lot of my buddies, I talked to a lot of guys in other bands, and a lot of them have the same thing. It's like, oh man, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I'm kind of feeling unmotivated, and, this whole business and da da da. So I think it kind of took its toll like that. But I mean, this is what we do. So it's like, eventually, we'll find something with the band. We'll get on a topic, and all of a sudden it will be like, all right, man, the floodgates are open. Here we go. Friggin' awesome. But it's just taking a little longer than normal. And I just think it's just because of what's happened. It's kind of sucks the life out of everything.
So you're starting to write the album?
Yeah. I mean, we've been talking a lot, and Yeah, man, like you were saying before, just like a little slow. It's just been slow because just not doing band things, all those things that when you do start to work on a record, they're kind of fresh in your mind, or you're coming off a tour and it's like, oh, that was a great show. And so that all goes away. And it's like, all right, time to be creative and try to be inspired now. And it's like, well shit, man, everything kind of going to hell all around us. But yeah, I mean, we've been talking, a couple ideas going back and forth. Um, yeah, I come down here every morning. I'm like, okay, see if I got something. Eventually, it's going. It's just taking a little slower than normal, and I think it's just because of of what's happened over the last 2 years.
I think that we take for granted that on every profession, people are being affected by having their lives upended so much, but there isn't much thought about. Well, imagine that what you do every day is an artistic pursuit and you're trying to create something. Imagine how you would be affected if you were told, well, you normally write to perform in front of people. We don't know when or if that's ever going to happen again. It must
Yeah,
be really, besides the financial part, which, as you just said yourself, has been crushing, just
yeah,
emotionally has to be crushing.
yeah. I mean, the money, whatever, we'll figure it out. It's the mental thing of it's like, oh yeah, man, time to be creative. It's like it's not a switch. There's always things that lead up to that creativity and having that inspiration. So yeah, when all that goes away, yeah, I mean we're musicians, so nobody gives a shit about us. It's like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. They'll be all right. It's like, oh man, it's definitely a tough thing.
It has been surprising because I think that with COVID, I kind of realized what people think of the music industry, and just out of ignorance, in the sense that they believe that it's just the musicians. But then you explain, no, there is a whole industry. I mean, caterers and security guards and all of those people are just unemployed.
I know a lot of guys, like my guitar tech, my good buddy forever. Um, he's like, I kind of can't do that anymore because it's just so unstable, and people have families and they have mortgages or they have kids, and it's like if if you can't plan and be sure of what's going to happen, it's like like I said, a lot of guys I know, it's like, hey man, this was cool, but now it's like I don't know what's going to happen, and I need to just be a little bit more secure in my life. So I mean, I get it.
Connected to this, I very recently was having a conversation with somebody that you know very well, Arjen Lucassen from
Hmm.
Arian, and one of the things he mentioned was that in reality his life, because of the kind of person that he is, in the sense of being a very creative person, a very artistic person, he has developed into a bit of a recluse, if you will, so that he said, like, listen, I've been in lockdown since I was like well before corona, like kind of an isolated person, and he creates in isolation. And I've spoken with other highly creative or highly productive artists, and many of them say that. And obviously, you are the creative force behind Symphony X. You are considered to be an extremely talented and creative guitarist. So I am curious as to how that social aspect plays for you. Do you think that you're a bit of a recluse creator or completely social?
I mean, a little bit, when it comes to recording or working on a record, yeah, I'm locked down here. I'm doing my thing. But then there's always that time. It's like, okay, we're all in the studio, we're down here, we're doing our thing, and then you're out, and then you're touring, and then you with everybody, and you're performing this stuff, and it's a whole different thing. And that's, it's those two sides, that the balance of those two sides. But yeah, and even to what you just said, I do know some guys that were super productive during the whole thing. And maybe just because it's like, oh, I'm locked down, I don't have to do anything, so I can just concentrate on my music. And I was like that in the beginning. I was okay with that because it was 2020. It was like, oh shit, our tour got canceled. It's like, oh man, that sucks, but it'll be okay next year. So it's like, oh okay, well, get this solo record done, and let's see what happens. 2020 and the next year. But then as it starts to drag on and more things get canceled, and then it's like, oh, dude, what is going on? It's like, oh, this is not good. So yeah, in the beginning, I could see myself. It didn't really have the impact like now. It's like I said, trying to work on the band stuff and putting ideas together. It's just a little slower, and I just think it's because of that time. Whereas some guys, yeah, they were probably just churning shit out. It's like, oh, I don't have to do anything, and it's like, oh, I'm just gonna do my music. And but I think anybody after a certain point, it's like, okay, this is just too much now. Now, like, you got to go out and do it.
As you know, since you mentioned the struggle that you're having now putting together, or the difficulty or the challenge of putting together the thing with Symphony X, I am a bit curious because Symphony X is, you were the first guy on board. You started the band. You have composed, I think, the vast majority of the music in Symphony X's albums, so that it feels very much like your creative expression, right? But you decided to create something separate, something parallel to it. First, you did World of Worlds Part One. Now you're releasing Part Two, and I'm curious as to when you decided that you wanted to create something parallel to this huge band. I mean, Symphony X is not just like a small basement project, of course. And second, why you decided to do that?
I think the big, I mean, there was a couple things. Probably the thing that really started it, um, and I think I started working on it in 2017 maybe. And Russ had just been in that accident, you know, and and he's my brother, dude. And I could tell, like, he's like, dude, I don't know, I don't know anymore about all this. I need some time to think, and then after going through something like that, it's like, I'm like, dude, I totally get it. I totally get it. So like the band, we just kind of went on hold for a minute. We were, downtime. We had downtime. And then it was like, okay, well, in the downtime, maybe I will do a solo thing. And there's some things maybe that the band wouldn't do. Um, in that first record, I mean, there's some of this metal, little dubstep thing. There's just things that the band would never do. And with the cinematic and the orchestral stuff and the guitar, it's like, yeah, I mean, I could really do more of that kind of thing. Even though the band, yeah, we do a lot of that as well, but maybe even just make it on a larger scale and expand upon it more. So, I mean, that's kind of when it all started.
In War of the Worlds, for those who are not familiar with it, you it's not just you doing guitar with a drum machine or just with a drummer, but instead it's a completely, as you said now, a very cinematic project. And you've composed a lot, not just for guitar, you also composed some orchestral sections, and you even played some instruments. I see your cello there, so I see that that's one
Yeah,
of
I
them
got
besides the guitar, but you also played a couple that I didn't know existed, the oud and the zaz.
the oud, the saz, yeah, yeah. I
Tell
mean,
me a little bit about, first, just out of personal curiosity at this point, what instruments do you play? We know the oud, the saz, the guitar, the cello. Where does it where does it go?
whatever I get my hands on, dude.
Really?
Honestly, yeah. I mean, like with talking about the saz or the oud or something, it's like with the solo record, I always want to try to find something a little different than the band or something, so on that song, it's like, oh, maybe I'll use a seven string because I never did that before. So there's something different. And then the song Destroyer, it has this Middle Eastern thing. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I could reach for some samples or some keyboard sound. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll just buy one and see and try to get it into the track. And, I'm like, okay. So I found some shops that, have that kind of thing. And, it takes me a minute, I get the thing. I'm like, oh shit, how do you even tune this thing? You know? But after a little bit of just finagling, I mean, if it has strings on it, I can kind of get it to make a sound. I could kind of, make my way. It's like, and I always wanted to play the cello and definitely not great or anything, but I can make a sound and it's like, well, okay, it's okay. But when it's in the music, like the saz or something, and it's tucked in there and it's a texture thing, totally works. It's not exposed. It's not like some, solo extravaganza thing. It's like, no, man, it's kind of texture back there and it sounds human and it sounds like there's something real happening.
I mean, I think that you're underselling it a little bit. I mean, I have a friend who is a conservatoire musician, a cellist, and we've talked quite a bit about playing cello. And what seems to be very clear to me is that this isn't an instrument that you can get away with half-assing a lot, right? Because it's a complex instrument. It has no frets. You just have to kind of
Hmm.
find your way around. And just the fact that you get inserted into a song says a lot about you. Whereas
Yeah.
you're saying, well, I mean, just a little bit. It's considerably more than that. How long have you been playing it?
I mean, a couple of years, but no, it's not. It is true. It's like I'm not. an accomplished player or anything. It's like I understand the mechanics of it. And a lot of times with these instruments, like, I have a couple woodwind instruments. I got a freaking marimba in the other room. So it's like I'll just try to get my hands on stuff. And I think the thing too about it is understanding the mechanics of of different instruments if you are going to use them, even if you're going to use like a virtual instrument patch or a synth thing. I think understanding is like if you were going to program drums, and if you don't know the mechanics of how it works, you're gonna have, oh yeah, I wrote this drum part and it's two cymbals and two toms at the same time. It's like the guy doesn't have four hands, so then stuff sounds not real. So I think for me, like the more that I understand the mechanics of an instrument, I could fake it. And with the cello, it's like, yeah, I mean, I could get by. I'm not terrible, but I'm definitely not great. But in the session and in the song, underneath everything, yeah, there's sampled strings playing and all that, and just a little of that underneath. It's like, oh, maybe that's the guy in the orchestra that's not that he's not feeling that good that day.
But
So it's, you know,
were you always because often it happens with people who grow up to be musicians that when they were kids they were very I'm not gonna say musical, but they were always making noise and trying to see the way things kind of sounded. Were you like that? Were you always expressing yourself musically?
uh, I don't know. I don't, no, not that I can remember, being that young. And then again, I can't remember what the hell I did yesterday. So you're, you know, talking a long time ago. But I mean, I do know that music, when I was young, there was something about certain things that even now they stay with me. I remember, you know, these old science fiction movies and Mysterious Island, or Jason and the Argonauts, those kind of movies, and that music. And there was something about it. And then, obviously later it's like, oh, that's Bernard Herrmann and he did Psycho. And it's like, oh yeah. And it's like, okay. And then you start looking into that. But as a kid, I remember there was something about the music thing. And then of course Star Wars. And it was just like, oh yeah, there's something about this. I mean, there's something about this music that that I get. I just get it. It's connecting with me somehow. And then of course, as you get older, it's like, okay, this is John Williams and this is what else he's done, and here's, his whole thing. So yeah, early on, I was always aware of it. And then of course, yeah, as you get older, it's like now when I go see a movie, I'm paying attention sometimes to the music more than the movie sometimes. Stupid, but
Clearly, movies have on the sound of movies has played a role in your musical career. I think that War of the Worlds, both of them make it very clear because you are trying to create, when we talk about cinematic, what we really mean is basically score movie music, right? Something like Hans Zimmer, John Williams, or something like that. And this is very much present in War of the Worlds. Based on that name, are you thinking of films like Jason and the Argonauts or something like Star Wars when you're making this music, or is it completely independent?
no, totally thinking about it. Oh, like I said, it's always there. It's always a part of the thing. And it's like, yeah, I did want to have these cinematic parts and these big orchestral things. And yeah, I mean, and I love classical music and Stravinsky, and try to put some of that in there. I mean, it still has to be metal. I mean, there's still going to be a bunch of Sabbath and Priest and Metallica kind of riffs, but and putting some of that stuff. And I think with the film stuff, especially Williams, um, a lot of those themes that he's given us, it's like, they are like little songs, very kind of a pop sensibility of, like, Indiana Jones, and we all know that theme, and Jaws, just the two notes, and in a short amount of time, there's this thing. So yeah, I mean, I didn't want to have this big orchestral thing and it goes on for half an hour and it's this big movement and da da da. No, just little songs. And I think that's why I like to. I mean, again, I love classical music and sit and listen to a 45-minute, Pulse to Planets or something. But something about Williams, it's like, or Zimmer, you just put on like the one piece. It's like, oh yeah, here's, take your pick, anything. Here's Vader, here's the Imperial March. Short little thing, right to the point. Here's the melody. We all know it. So that I think I like about that.
I think it's also about the evocative power of that music, in the sense that if you've watched Star Wars one once and you just hear the Imperial March after that, you know exactly who or what it is they're talking about. And I guess that you, as a composer, are also trying to, but in this case, with the difficulty of not having a movie to go with it, of
Yeah, but the
evoke.
movie's here, man.
No,
Movie's
but not
right
for you.
here.
So that's the thing, right? You're trying to create this movie in the mind of your audience, I assume.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you don't have that medium of the thing, but I'm thinking it. Yeah, I mean, I am thinking it, and that's why, especially with the band and even this, it's like we try to latch onto a theme, so we'll be able to have that picture. Be it Paradise Lost or the Odyssey, perfect example, the Odyssey. It's like okay, here's this big, epic, timeless tale, and again, yeah, something like that. It's like I was probably Jason and the Argonauts. That kind of is in that world and getting into some of that.
In the case of this cinematic part, you're trying to kind of play this movie in your head as you're writing the music. Do you do something like that also when you're creating less cinematic music, as it is in the case of Symphony X?
No, not really. I mean, sometimes it's just a cool riff that's heavy. It doesn't need to have all this fluff around it. It's just like, yeah, man, this is just like a badass riff, and it goes from here to here, and it's like, yeah. I mean, it depends on the kind of song. If the band's like, okay, hey, man, let's try to put something together that's, take your pick, any kind of epic thing. It's like, okay, well, this song's going to be a little longer, and then you're thinking about the visual kind of thing. But if it's just like, yeah, man, let's just have like the opening track rocker song, and it's like, okay, then it's just coming up with cool riffs and something that feels good, that you're playing, not thinking about any of that other stuff.
In Word of the Worlds Part 2, you're joined by Gigi DeServio from Black Label Society on
Hmm.
bass, John Macaluso from Yngwie Malmsteen, and he filled for Jason Rulo a couple of times in Symphony X, I think in South America.
Yeah. Hmm.
But I didn't see in the press release who's in charge of vocals. I think they didn't include it. So who's singing in this album?
Yeah, and I think that was some kind of error on their part. Something kind of slipped by. It's Dino Jalusic. Dino did the vocals. And like this one, it was like, I just wanted to, maybe try something different with vocals and again, talking, maybe I'd have a different vocalist on a different song. And, I didn't end up doing that. And then, yeah, again, Simo put us in touch. Um, yeah, and it just worked out great. I mean, he did a fantastic job. Yeah, he's friggin' great.
To conclude, as I mentioned, I spoke with Aryan recently, and one of the questions that I had to do with the way in which he is reported about. So, whenever there are interviews with Aryan or they mention something about Aryan, they say the genius behind or the mastermind or something like that. And there are very similar words. When I did the research for the interview, in many places they speak about you in those terms. They speak about guitar god. You are considered to be one of the in one of these many rankings, like one of the best guitarists on the planet. I think top 100. Um, and I'm curious, without any false modesty, because I'm setting up the question anyway. How do you see yourself as a musician, as a guitarist?
Definitely guitar is like the first thing for me. And then, but still, songwriting and composition is about equal. I mean, when we were young, all of us as players, we were practicing and learning all this stuff, and it was all about the technique and the speed. And it's like, okay. And then you get to a point, like for me, I got to a point where it's like, okay, I think I'm okay with that. And let's look at this side, the composition side, the songwriting, the arranging side, even producing and trying different textures and all that stuff. So for me, it was always that. It was always like a bigger picture, I think, you know. And with the band, the same thing. It's and even just the band, even in the solo stuff. Yeah, I mean, I'll write the stuff, but I think the important thing is, if say for Symphony X, for instance, and we're working on something now. I mean, I'll put the skeleton of the song together. Maybe I'll have a melody idea, and then it's like, okay, Russ comes down and it's like, well, here's my thing. Um, Now, make it your own, embellish it. Maybe you want to change this. So, and I think that, um, yeah, I'll come up with a lot of the basic things. But I think like pulling everyone in, same thing with the solo record. It's like with, Macaluso, it's like, yeah, I'll program some drums and this is kind of how the song goes, but take that and embellish it and make it your own. So I think for me, it's always it's always been that kind of thing. I don't want to. Um, I want people, to kind of have the freedom and their creative expression, because I think in the end, they're a little more invested in it at that point. So for me, yeah. So for me, it's like, yeah, man. I'll put the basic ideas together, and then with the band, it's like, yeah, I might have something on piano, and I'm like, okay, but Pinella comes down, I'm like, dude, here's kind of my idea, what do you got? And he'll just take it from here, and then it's like, oh shit, I'm like, yeah, dude. I mean, that's so yeah. So then it's like the band thing is happening. It's like, yeah, the idea starts here, and then everybody's coming into the picture and putting another layer on the cake, so to say. And I think the end result is always better, because it's like, yeah, I'm not a singer. I'm not gonna, I can have a melody, but it's like, if you want to sing this a certain way, or you're feeling this, it's like, yeah, that's what makes it real.
Michael, thank you so much for your time. And
No, thank
I
you,
wish you
man.
all the best. You mentioned that you're going on tour in May, so I hope that that goes well. And I hope that we can see you in our shores very soon.
Yeah, dude, I hope everything goes according to plan, but fingers crossed, man. That's fingers crossed.
Take care of yourself, man. Bye bye.
All right, man. Take it easy.